So welcome again, Kavita, Shobit, and Fabrice. We're going to have more or less 30 minutes. Thank you for joining us today. And we're going to talk about product hubs around the world and how the product community is kind of popping up a little bit all over the place, but also other topics. So let me just head on and start by asking maybe Kavita. Thank you so much for your presentation today. Kavita, Harvard Business Review said last year that most corporate digital transformation projects actually fail inside companies. So we're talking about the waste of hundreds of billions of dollars. And you gave us a framework of how you guys are developing this inside Hosh. So why do you think this is still such a striking phenomenon? Why so many projects still fail, Kavita?
So Andre, thank you for having me, and I'm super excited to be here. So that's a great question. I think there are many reasons, but I'll sort of share the top three that come to mind based on the evidence we have. First and foremost, most large enterprises and even mid-sized organizations only focus on the technical aspects of digital transformation. And this happens all the time when we at Moves the Needle work with our clients. For example, we were working with a very large insurance company a few months back, and they wanted to, and now with COVID, I think McKinsey came up with some data in terms of how it has sort of accelerated the pace of digital transformation, but a lot of organizations are still thinking about the technical aspects of digital transformation. And that is not a recipe for success. It's not about just digitizing your products, having all the right technology in place. It is also about focusing on the business aspect, right? In terms of making sure that you have a diverse portfolio that includes digital products, you have an online presence that actually then help you achieve your business goal. So that's one. The second is organizational. You want to be sure that your organization has that mindset, right, to help drive digital transformation. And that involves a cultural change. So you want to be sure that it's not just your engineers, but your product managers, your R&D people, even your legal and finance professionals have that mindset that helps you drive digital transformation. And the mindset it really requires you to be able to move fast, right? And when I say move fast, not moving fast for the sake of moving fast, but making sure you are going bold, you're following the evidence, and you are taking informed risks, right? And so that's the second thing. And last but not least, it is about making sure that your leadership is all committed to it and bought in and are thinking about it the same way, right? Very often at the executive level, each leader has a different point of view in terms of what that means and what it looks like. And you want to make sure that your leadership has buy-in too, right? And is thinking about it in the same way, and they're committed to it, not just with the technological aspect, but also with the business side of things.
Great. So thanks, Avita. Shobit, you are working for, which is arguably probably the one of the biggest, if not the biggest, disruptor in this digital world we live in, Google. So how do you see all this? How do you see the role that big companies like Google have in this digital transformation that we are living nowadays, in most companies at least?
I would say a couple of things. So one, very often the role of large companies, at least way back in the past, was, hey, this is a large company, And so now they've gotten slow, they've gotten, sort of, they're ready to be disrupted by other companies and whatnot. But more so with Google, with Amazon, Facebook, all these large companies, what I'm seeing is that there is a lot of thinking that's really looking at what's going to happen next, not now, maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and really placing those bets that are enabling those new technologies to come out that ultimately help other companies go through this the digital transformation, whether it's web services, whether it's any sort of infrastructure, like all those things, the large companies are doing. But I think to the second point, what I see them enabling is in some sense, by providing all these services, leveling the playing field where, this digital transformation doesn't have to happen at other mid-sized companies. Somebody with a radical new idea can come, can sort of get kickstarted, and like a product that I work on is called Firebase, where all the infrastructure for mobile apps, that's just taken care of. You get started without having to worry about all those things. So all that gets taken care of, and you can focus on truly your users, what's the unique value you're providing. So another case where they become enablers to accelerate the digital transformation, whether it's happening at other companies or even entrepreneurs who are starting afresh. That answer your question, Andre?
Yeah, I think so. And I also think that when I was listening to Radhika's presentation, and when Radhika was talking about the Singapore example, and I was just laughing inside because I was thinking that, that's great for Singapore, Radhika, where I don't know how many people they have now, maybe 2 or 3 million people. And when the vision was set 50 years ago, maybe they have like 500,000 people. So you could do that in such a small country, but can you do that in countries that are essentially opposite to Singapore, countries like Portugal or countries like India that are totally chaotic, where it's basically, selling that vision is such a hard thing. So, and then that of course applies to some companies. How can bigger companies buy into product thinking and therefore what it entails?
Yeah. So Singapore, by the way, it's about 5.5 million people, but and you're right. I think yes, being a small country, right? That certainly helps. But what I've been fascinated by is just the very systematic approach that they've taken in terms of engineering change. And I see a comment here from Ricardo Luis saying, they were a dictatorship. Looking at the state of our democracy at the moment around the world, there's something to be said that, hey, a benevolent dictatorship may just be the way to go. Just saying. But I think the main thing about engineering change is really that it starts with a very clear purpose, right? And whether it's digital transformation at a large company, or we're talking about a whole country transforming itself, it really all starts with a very clear purpose, and then being able to spread that purpose. So, I think the point that you bring up, how do you spread that purpose, is a big piece of it. And I think that spreading that purpose has been very hard at the moment in the age of disinformation. If we want to spread that purpose for what do we stand for as a country, that's one of the first places that in terms of strategy we need to tackle. There are ways of doing this. Like one example is like there's been research that shows that in countries that are not as polarized in the last 4 decades as the US, right? One of the biggest reasons or correlations is that those countries spend more on public media. So there is this whole aspect of education and spreading the right message. And that could be one of our strategies. So I think, yes, Singapore has an advantage basically because they are smaller and they're able to engineer change, and that change happens faster here. But if we had vision in a larger country, we could also take a similarly systematic approach. There's research. It's a matter of having the willpower to be able to really apply it.
And how do you frame that into companies? So is it the same strategy for a bigger company? It's to divide for conquering, or how do you formulate that for bigger companies, Radhika?
Yeah, and one of my, what goes wrong in terms of building products, or what goes wrong when we're trying to build successful products, is often, even when you start with a good vision, right, somewhere between vision and everyday activities, there's a break in the chain. So for us to be able to engineer change, we need to start with a clear vision and then very systematically translate it into everyday activities. And so in a large company, if we're able to do that, like one of the key ways that I talk about is that vision versus sustainability, because that's one way of constantly thinking about every decision that we're making, and then thinking about, is this helping me with my vision, or are we just doing it because it's helping us survive? Is it helpful in the short term? If I think about something that we're doing in the US, that's obsessive sales disorder. I talk about this in my book, by the way. A lot of our anti-immigration policies that we're taking on right now, right? If we look at the vision versus sustainability, that is helping us get votes in the short term, but it's not a good vision fit for the country. And so we're taking on a lot of vision debt. And so by thinking about, are we doing things that are vision debt, or are we investing in the vision in the country? That's one of the ways we can actually invest in the vision and continue to build what's really helping us and taking us towards that end vision that we have for our country.
But I guess the question then would be, so how much vision depth am I allowed to have, right? So what's the balance? What's the trade-off that I can do here? And how is there a framework for that? Is there a guideline that I can use for my company to say, okay, I'm having this depth, but that's fine because I'm allowed to do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of that really depends on the discussion. So this framework is really intended to spark those discussions. So in a large company, it's about, or small, right? Really, it's about building that alignment, right? If I'm a startup and I'm bootstrapping my startup, I may be taking on a lot of vision debt. And in that case, right, I'm doing kind of custom work to be able to just survive another day. And so the important thing is we acknowledge that, we're taking on this vision debt. Here's why we're doing it, but here's what we're going to do next to overcome the vision debt. And similarly, if you're a larger company, maybe you can invest in the vision, or let's say you have lots of money that you've gotten as venture capital, maybe you can invest in the vision. And so it's a matter of building that alignment and how much can we do in each quadrant, basically, and creating that alignment.
Thank you.
Can I sort of jump in and build on what Radhika just said? I think, and I'm going to focus on large organizations in terms of the vision, right? I think, yes, most organizations have a vision and it's very aspirational, and that's great. I think where things start breaking down is two places. One, getting buy-in from the broader org, right? If the leadership has a vision and they believe in it and they're thinking, okay, let's go make it happen, but you do not do a good job of getting buy-in from your organization, you're never going to be able to execute on it. So I think one of the things, it's super critical that your vision is not top down, but it is almost sort of a little bit of top down, but a lot of bottom up, right? And I mean, I can give you an example. A company that I used to work at and work with regularly called Intuit, they did, at one point, they did have a top-down vision. And, it was a great aspirational vision, but because people weren't bought into it, it was very hard to execute on. And so what they did was they really ensured that every step of the, every part of the organization was bought into it and actually helped create that vision. And they were able to very quickly get buy-in and execute on it. And, they've seen their profits actually, double and triple as a result of that. And when I say profit, it's not profit for the sake of profit, but because they're very customer focused, they're very employee focused, and they were able to do that. And so I think that's super critical. And of course, the second thing is coming up with a strategy, right? And a game plan to execute on it. so that you're able to deliver. So I think those are really two things you need to be very mindful of. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if I understand right, Fabrice, you would add like a third axis to this vision, which is ethical axis, right? So
Yeah, definitely.
what's your idea here? Is that companies should have this ultimate North Star being this ethical guides? What are you trying to bring us to consider that maybe some companies are not, and some companies and some startups are still not seeing so well? Because
That,
you have
yeah.
seen. Oh, and by the way, it seems that you guys have coordinated some of the presentations, because Iron Man or Marvel or Disney, whoever holds the rights today, we hopefully they haven't seen this live, but I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I know you haven't.
No, I think there are two things that are actually really important. The first thing is that I think a lot of people in the technology are optimistic people, and maybe too optimistic people. We've seen a lot of people saying, and I think that Radhika and I are the same position, we get a side discussion about this, is that they say, well, it's not a problem for now because I do it later and I try to correct it with technology. Radhika was talking about AI, for example, saying that, okay, the move fast and break things is great. The idea of it is great. So the problem is when things are people, there's a problem. You can't move fast and break people because you cannot unbreak them afterwards. You can do that and fixing a bug, but you cannot fix people. And I think it's a problem of responsibility. There's been a debate around is technology responsible of the harm, or are users responsible of the harm? And actually, none of the answers are great. It's because we don't sell technology, we sell usage. We never sell technology itself. It doesn't, it's inanimate. So if we sell the usage, so the behavior, we are responsible of the behavior that are created by a product. We cannot just say it's not responsible because people are dumb. The classical excuse from weapon sellers are weapons don't kill, people kill. Well, the problem is that in our case, we need to think about what could go wrong before releasing anything. We cannot consider everything. When I'm talking about Shobit, because I'm not a Google Googler or something like that, or people at Facebook, you cannot, when you are that scale, prevent everything. It's impossible just to think of all the things that people could do with your product. And when you have billions of users, it's just impossible, even with AI. But when you're a small company and you can think about what you could break just before, what could go wrong, just thinking about this and trying to measure things, saying, okay, I won't discover that afterwards. Let's discover it now. All the companies, well, using such technologies are, I don't know if it's innocence or being naive or anything like that. And I think it's more ignorance, which is the problem. It's not bad intentions. I hope so, because I have faith in humanity. But I guess that we have now the possibility to try to measure behaviors, to try to alert through data about what things that could go wrong, and trying to at least do an alert around this so that we can act on it before it's a catastrophe. That would be lovely. And all the discussion that I have with all people, especially in France, because I'm French, and all startups, they're all okay with that. But usually what they say is that it's not the right time. You know, it's usually that. We're talking about product debt, okay, or vision debt. But there's an ethical debt. If you don't do this now, actually, you will harm the future.
If I can add on to that, right? I think the point that you make about we can't move fast and break things or break people, right? One of the things I like to say is not everything that can be disrupted should be disrupted, right? We have to take on that responsibility when we decide what we want to disrupt things. And to your point, Andre, when you started, right, you were asking, like, does this mean you need a third axis? I think Fabrice and I were so aligned. Like, I actually think your vision axis is partly your ethics axis. Your vision should be about the problem you want to solve in the world. It's not just a mechanism for making money. And so, if you're doing things that is a vision fit, it's because there's that it's helping you create a certain change that you envision in the world. And that's one of the biggest problems that I find in terms of what is a good vision. We very often, like Facebook started with a vision of being open and connected. But if we really look into that and say, what does it mean to be open and connected? Yeah. It's not telling you what the end state of the world really looks like. And that is, I feel, where you don't have that sort of a vision for that world. And I think if we had that, then you can start looking at, are we creating vision debt in the world? And it feels like we are.
Absolutely. So let's just go and head on to our questions from our attendees on Slido, because I know we have great questions there and we have lots of questions there. So the first one that maybe it's actually from Ricardo Luis. Hi, Ricardo. Nice for having you here today. So love this first series of talks. It seems that PMs need good doctors and mental coaches. What would you say are the top 3 challenges of a PM and how to solve? So maybe Shobit can answer this one. Shobit.
I'll begin. I think you don't need mental coaches necessarily, but you need the mindset. Now, whether you build a mindset through a coach, through a community, yourself, that is absolutely critical. I'll answer my top 3 challenges that I see in PMs, and please, other people, other panelists, please jump in. Number 1, not really understanding what good product looks like in the context of a particular company, because it is so different. That's often the challenge. And I think the second one that goes along with it, feeling that you're not doing true product because you didn't follow everything from the book Inspired from beginning to end. That, in my mind, is the second one. And then the third one is very close to what Radhika was saying, which is that vision debt, which is optimizing for the short term, optimizing for the metrics gain, but not really aligning it with where the company wants to go and really what is the impact to the user in the long term. So those are the 3 biggest ones that I see as challenges for PMs. We would love to hear from the rest of the panel.
Yeah, maybe let's just see some more questions, and we'll get back to this one later. So this is for Kavita from Luis Skyra. Hello, Luis, also a friend. Was the lean innovation example of Roche a top-down initiative? And regarding management buy-in in big corporations, which you were talking about, leadership, but I guess having this leadership alignment must be quite hard. So can you tell us a little bit about the inside story of Roche?
Yes, absolutely. And the inside story of Roche is very typical of the way we sort of work with larger organizations. So totally, you need both, leadership buy-in and you need team buy-in. They're both, it's not one or the other. And how we work with teams, and which we did at Roche, was that you don't need buy-in of the whole executive team. You just need one person who believes in it and will be an advocate for this approach. And what that means is they will work with the leadership team to bring them along, and they will support the teams working in this way, both when they work as a team, plus removing blockers for them and advocating for them within the broader organization. And I think that's the way it was with Roche. Also, in fact, we had, in the AMA, we had the sponsor actually join us, and some of you were able to hear their point of view in terms of, he decided that let's go ahead and work in this way and learn by doing. And he created these, we always ask them to create a growth board, which is sort of a group of internal investors, and that group consists of people who are instrumental in the decision-making process. So you have a good, breadth in terms of people from product, people from legal, finance. So all those people who will be responsible for different decisions. So they sit on this growth board And the growth board meets with the teams periodically. In this case, they had a 30-day cadence to actually learn about where the teams are at, what they're learning, and help them make decisions. So I think, I hope that answers your question. So yes, it did have leadership buy-in, but it was not a top-down approach. I think that is super critical. What we did was we created these self-contained, empowered teams that were able to make most decisions on their own with the help of evidence and help the organization move forward in terms of deciding on what the ideas are, what the solution looks like. Is there a need solution fit? Now, when we've established that there is a need and this is the right solution, is there a product market fit? Is it the right product for the market? So I think that's a big distinction. Hope that answers
Absolutely.
your question.
So let's just head for a third question before we close this round. So I would like to see maybe here another question from Victor. Hi, Victor. So how Hush can use mockups or fast prototypes to test new products or major features in this industry? It's not obvious for this type of industry. And I guess most people, and what Victor might be thinking about, is that we are also talking about hardware prototypes and physical prototypes, right? Because it's not just software, it's not just a purely digital experience. So how do you guys work in terms of fast prototyping with Hush?
Yes, that's a great question. And this goes back to both, and I'm going to sort of give you the context. This goes back to what can you build quickly and also the ethical part, because you are dealing with people who have a disease and who have an illness. And so the key is it depended on your assumption that you were validating, right? And so early on, you are just trying to you're using your prototyping as a way to understand if there is a need for, or there is a pain that your solution will serve. And in that case, for example, the team had an assumption that people will be able to, people will use a home testing kit if they provided it to them to measure their insulin level, right? Mm-hmm. And they just created a very lo-fi prototype, which was just a little box with a cable that they then took to customers and made it very clear to them that this is something that would allow you to measure your insulin levels at home, and would you use it? And if they said yes, they said, okay, show us how you would use it. So that was really a quick way to validate that there was a need and that people would actually use it. So you have to make sure your prototype helps you validate your hypothesis, right? And based on customer behavior. And now
right.
As the solution—
And that was a non-functional prototype, right? That was a purely non-functional prototype.
Right. But as the complexity increases and you want to understand if your product has a market for it or it has a need for it, then you don't want to spend money building something complex. And what the team did was they created a video, which actually demonstrated how the product would work, and asked people, right? They sent it out, they sort of sent it out to customers and asked them if they would pre-order something like that.
Right. The key word is pre-order, right? Not just would you use this or would you take this, right?
And people pre-order, and the team is actually building that right now, and they will be launching soon. So I think there are ways around. To Andre's point, you have to be very clear on what's your hypothesis, what is the minimum needed to test the hypothesis, and you want to make sure you have a currency or a signal that helps you accurately test it without violating your customer's privacy or any kind of ethics.
Yeah, prototyping, exactly. Thanks, Peter, for your question. So let's head on to another question. I think we still have time for one more. This one is from Luis. Merci, Fabrice. So a little bit of French here, for bringing ethics into product management. Assuming TIGA helps corporations with product initiatives, do you see a pushback for ethics in this context? Bottom line, only sinking. And I think this question is you know, it's really, it's something that I was watching your presentation, I was thinking exactly the same. So how do you guys manage this inside your own consulting business?
Well, it's always complicated because usually, especially in big corporations, which is just one part of our customers, the burden of the decision is not on the guy who is in front of us. So usually a lot of things have been voted, budgeted, a lot of features have already been decided. And the first rule that we have is to actually put doubt into the equation and saying we can doubt with method. Exactly what Kavita was talking about. So it's always complicated when you just say, well, I don't know if your job is going to cover a need, to add another layer, which is, well, is covering that need a great thing? And should we choose to do something which has a footprint, environmental or individual economical footprint that is lower? And it's really hard to actually argue with people like that. So we haven't really have civil bullets of any sort on that topic, especially when you're talking about digital transformation, when usually we talk about products and technology, and we tend to forget or that, well, organization is a product in itself, processes, the operating model, and usually that's this part which is the hardest to change. So if you add these kind of things, usually people, it's not a pushback, it's that there are too many things to change. And if you want to add another change, it's just impossible for them to consider. On, I'd say, medium-sized companies, scale-ups, for example, it's complicated too, but there's a bit of the possibility to have someone which is part of the executive community, not only of the initiative, but the executive community of the company. So that's always easier to actually be able to talk to these guys to try to make a change. It's really the difference. When you work with BNP Paribas or Société Générale, you will never see the CEO. He doesn't care about you, he doesn't know you even exist. So it's hard to act on this. I don't know if Kavita, have you managed to do anything on that part, or Radhika maybe?
Sorry, can you repeat your question again?
How hard it is to actually put some ethics in products when you're trying to transform people, saying digital transformation is one big change. How can you add another ingredient to the recipe?
Yeah, and my approach has been by actually answering the who, what, why, and the how questions. So basically saying, you know, whose world are we trying to change? Getting us to agree on, you know, what is the problem? Why does that world need changing? And that to me gets to the heart of ethics, because maybe that world doesn't need changing. And if we decide that this is why the status quo is completely unacceptable, then you say, okay, so what is the end state that I envision instead? And those two questions of why is the current world unacceptable and what's that end state we envision, those are 2 points that I feel like many companies don't answer. And without answering those, we just sort of iterate and we see what increases our financial metrics or moves them up and to the right, but we don't create the world that we really want to live in.
I think, yeah, I agree. And I think building on that, a few questions that we have our clients ask are, one, what's the severity and frequency of that pain, right? And can it be solved? And are we the right people to solve it, right? And for us, when we work with bigger organizations, and you know, typically ethics is very top of mind for them. And it's not, sometimes it is for the right reason. At other times it's purely because, hey, we are a brand and it's our, you know, we need to make sure that we are protecting our brand. So it's sort of a little bit of that, you know, those checks and balances get baked into it. Now, I'm not saying all organizations are like that, but I think, you know, going back to the Facebook example, I do believe when Facebook started out, they had all the right intentions. And so, you know, you've got to kind of monitor and watch out that you are staying true to what you believed in to start with and what your purpose was. And, you know, in our case, at least in my experience, most big brands who believe in their purpose are very mindful of that.
Very well. So I think we have just completed our time for this fireside chat. So it is really super. I'm super glad that you could make it, especially because we have a panel that spans Pacific Coast US with Kavita. I know that Shobit is in Boston. I know that Fabrice is in Paris, or are you actually in Paris right now?
Yeah, lockdown those.
It's a long time in Paris, and Hadika, she's doing an extra effort to stay awake late nights in Singapore, 5 or 6 hours ahead of us. So guys, world stage, this is a true world stage. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll be back in 30 minutes. We'll have the coffee break right now. You can jump into the coffee shop room if you want, engage with the attendees, engage with each other. If not, stay here. We'll have some pictures of Lisbon and walking tours of Lisbon and surroundings. That's the best Lisbon we can take to you right now, but I think it will be fun. So guys, see you in 30 minutes. And my colleague Elena Tizatu will be the co-host for the last stretch of Productized conference today. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.